Hey, what's up guys? This is Marseille, aka the Property Pastor, coming at you with another video, giving you some tips and tricks on how you can start in real estate investing with no money in your pocket. I want to talk a little bit about a pretty cool subject. It's called creative financing. And creative financing is really just a way to get a person to sell you a property with little to no money down. Now, there are a ton of gurus out there who've got a bunch of different methodologies and tactics and tricks and things like that, but I'm only going to cover a few main things. I'm going to cover three main things. It's just my tips that I'm going to give you. The very first one is owner financing. Owner financing is a phenomenal tool that I love, that I've used many times. Owner financing is basically when you find an owner of a property who's willing to be the bank on your behalf. So that person could own that property free and clear. That person could have really high equity in that property, and they may do something they call a wrap deal. But if you find somebody who owns a property free and clear, and you're able to give them, say for example, 3%, 5% on their money, they're going to make a tremendous amount over time, right? It's going to save them also in tax benefits and things like that. But typically, you don't just walk up to a person and say, hey, I know you own this house. Can we do owner financing? You got to build rapport. We'll talk about that in further videos about negotiation and building rapport and things like that. But if you can find an owner, right, you can find somebody who's a tired landlord, about to retire, somebody who's got a bunch of properties and are looking to get rid of them, and they still want to gain income, but they don't want the headache of a property, they are ideal for owner financing, right? So owner financing, I've used that on, I think, like 3 deals. And it's actually worked out phenomenally. I've been able to get into properties for very little money, take them over, and once you own that property, you can refinance it, pull it out, and if you have what they call a balloon, you can pay them off on the back end. So that's the first one, owner financing, and that's a really good one to add to your toolbox. Next one I want to talk about is subject to. Subject to is basically where you take over a property subject to the existing loan. And there's a ton of content out on the web about subject to, and we'll talk about that in future videos. But subject to is basically, like I said, when you go in, you find someone who's either behind on their mortgage, they might be getting divorced, they're highly motivated to sell, and they want to get rid of that property. You can take that property over subject to the existing loan, right? So it might be a loan with a great rate, might be paid down to a certain amount, and if that person is motivated, you can take it over, right, and then basically put a tenant buyer in place and let them pay the underlying mortgage. So that's a pretty cool concept, but I would recommend that to you because you don't need that traditional 20% down. A lot of people are like, I don't have 20% down to put on a $100,000, $200,000 house, but with subject to, you can get into the house for a few $1,000s. Sometimes you can get into it for absolutely nothing. So subject to is a really cool one. Last one I want to tell you about is lease options. Now, lease option is basically it's a creative financing technique where you go and you find a person, right, and they still have, typically they're going to have their underlying loan with the bank, and you'll go in and you'll basically become the tenant. And I'm just going to primarily talk about being a sandwich lease option. So basically what you do is you sublet. Many of you have heard of what subleasing is or subletting is, but you go in, you find that property, right? That person is paying their mortgage to Wells Fargo or whoever. You now come in as the sandwich person. You sign a purchase agreement, and then you go and you find a back-end buyer. That back-end buyer may not have the credit, may not have the 20%, right? But what you're going to do is you're going to tell the seller, hey, I'll give you 3% down or whatever, and then I want to rent this property or lease it from you for about 5 years, right? And during that time, you're now finding a tenant buyer on the back end, and you're qualifying that tenant buyer so that they can ultimately cash you out and then pay off the existing underlying mortgage. Now, with a lease option, you basically get paid 3 times. You get paid up front with the lease fee, right? So the lease option for that person, the tenant buyer, for them to want to take over the property, they're going to give you what they call an option fee, and that's typically a non-refundable option fee. So let's say, for example, they give you $8,000, right? But you had to pay an option fee to your buyer of, let's say, $4,000, right? Now you get to go in and you pocket that $4,000. That's payday number 1. But then on top of it, you're going to have monthly cash flow. So let's say, for example, the person that you're buying from, their underlying loan is about, I don't know, let's say $600. But then you go and you rent it out for $1,000. That spread of $400, you get to keep it every single month, right? But then on the back end, when you finally go and you sell that property, there is the spread in equity. So all that money that's been paying down, right? If you bought it for $120 and then you go in and you sell it for $170, guess what? You've now made $50,000. So we made $4 on the front. Now we're making $400 in the middle, and then on the back end we're making another 50 grand. So that's a really amazing tool, really powerful tool. But you got to invest in your education. So we'll have more videos coming up on that. But these are some things I just wanted, some quick tips, some quick hacks I wanted to give you so you can get started with hardly any money in your pocket.